Yes, Mr. Tossman, I do. How are you? Thank you. I appreciate that. It's great to hear from you. So Nick is a good friend of mine, and so I was watching it with particular enthusiasm, both knowing that I had a couple of friends in that vehicle and that I would be sitting on the rocket next. When it happened, I was listening to the audio real time and seeing what was going on. And I think when you're an operator, you know how to fly these vehicles and you kind of understand everything that's going on. We're always looking at the next steps that we take. And so, we've trained that particular emergency multiple times in the simulator. And so as soon as I heard the indications that they were getting, I just kind of followed along with them right when they were conducting their next steps to get a safe landing. There wasn't really a lot of emotion in it until after reflecting on it. Obviously understanding that Nick is okay, and then I did think about how it would affect our launch. But the point to drive home really is that I saw that as a success because we had Nick and Alexa home that night. Absolutely. Nick and I sat down, and our whole crew actually sat down with Nick and got his impressions. What did he see her first? What did he feel first? What would he have done differently? Because we knew we'd be on it next. And so it was a good opportunity to sit down. It was a lot more dynamic than obviously what we're used to in the simulator. We don't have motion simulators here in Russia. So, he kind of passed on the effect of the forces that the launch abort system works with. And I think he helped us get ready, and we adjusted a few things for our launch, but we're ready to go. So I think that's a question that we always ask ourselves. Anybody that's in a high risk occupation, military, pilots, we always have to evaluate why we're doing what we're doing. And I believe that without risk, there's no reward. And what I hope that my family and other people take away from our launch is what it takes to achieve something great. There's sacrifice on the part of countries and budgets, and then there's sacrifices on the part of individuals and families. And sometimes our families pay a higher price than we do. We're often gone, but we have this amazing thing called space flight at the end of it, and our families are having to do without us in our absence. So I hope to inspire others to kind of get over their fears in order to accomplish something great, to get over those sacrifices, understand that nothing that's worth achieving is easy. So the Soyuz rocket has an amazing track record. Like you said at the beginning, a launch has not been aborted since 1983, and that was a pad abort where the whole rocket kind of erupted in flames, and the crew successfully landed and went on to fly again. Going to space is not easy. The crew in October was lucky, but so is every crew that has flown in space over the last 50 years, 60 years. And, I'm very familiar with the rocket and with the redundancy of their systems and with their safety systems. And I'll be frank with you, I would have gotten on a rocket the day after that happened. Mhm.
Yes.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think something that you come to appreciate in this, or that I've come to appreciate in this profession is that, from the outside, it looks like we are risk takers. But I will tell you that everybody that works inside of the space program is a professional risk mitigator. And so we have steps, we have procedures to handle kind of any emergency, and I'm confident in those procedures. And so I saw the October 11th incident not as a failure, but as an absolute success. In the test pilot world, we kind of have a saying that if you're going to test the aircraft, don't test the ejection seat at the same time. Have a very good way out if you're going to test something. And what this really proves is that the Russian launch abort system is a really great design, and for that reason, we kind of have that backup plan. And I think that's important for designers going forward that are building space vehicles to take note and say, hey, the probabilities that we were working with aren't 100%. And so if we're at 99% and we're going to do 100 launches, that means we're going to have a failure. And how do we want the end of that failure to look? And I think October 11th is the right answer. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Yes, I have, and I'm glad that you could make it. Yes, yes, likewise. Since the failure since October 11th, I've gotten that question a lot, and I will say that the bottom line is that I would have got on the Soyuz rocket the next day. I know that a lot of people see that as a failure, and it's often called that. But inside this community where we mitigate risk professionally every single day, that was a success story. We used the system. I say we, our space agencies, we relied on a system to save the lives of two of our astronauts and cosmonauts that had not been exercised since 1983, despite all of the launches, 3 to 4 launches every single year. And when it was called on, it worked flawlessly and as designed. And the crew was lucky, but every crew that makes it to orbit is lucky. Space flight's not easy. I do have confidence. I would not be sitting here if I didn't have confidence in this rocket and the systems. NASA and Roscosmos and other agencies around the world have worked together to figure out what the cause was. And our biggest things that we want to know how it happened or what happened, why it happened, and how to make sure it didn't happen again. And until we had all those puzzle pieces, we were not given the go for launch. And I have full confidence that that investigation was conducted. I work with the Russians here at Roscosmos and Energia every single day, and they're some of the best people that I've worked with. And I have full confidence that they want a safe launch as much as I do. I think all of the above. This is not an experience that you can really have an analog for and train perfectly on the ground. And so, feeling the thrust of the rocket is going to be something that I really am looking forward to. I think, all our lives when we're, especially no matter who you are, when you're accomplishing something that is so major, whether it's becoming a professional athlete or a congressman or, whatever our dreams are, we always see all these barriers to achieving those dreams. And I was speaking with an astronaut recently who said, when he launched and went to space, he realized that was the first day of his whole life that instead of seeing barriers, he saw the accomplishment. He realized nothing was going to stand in his way. So I'm looking forward to riding the rocket. I'm looking forward to, getting to space and looking back at our Earth out the cupola window and kind of having that perspective. I think all of it is going to be a completely new experience that I can't quite predict. So I get asked that a lot, and sometimes it's really hard to put to words. I think that for as long as mankind has existed, we've had a propensity to explore. We go across lands, we go across water, and then the next logical step was to start flying. Just over 100 years ago, and of course now we're going to look up at the stars and say what's next, what's out there. I don't think human beings will ever stop exploring. It's in our DNA. We always want to look over around the next corner and see what's there. And you mentioned I wanted to be an astronaut since I was 3 years old. When I went off to preschool, I told my parents, I said, I'm going to school to learn to be an astronaut. I don't know what struck me at that age. I can't define it, but I do know that it has been something so magical that has given me such a purpose, my whole life, and I'm really looking forward to achieving it. Great. Good morning, and good morning to everybody in Spokane. That's right. On December 3rd, we'll be launching. It's going to be nice and early Spokane time, 3:30 a.m., but I hope that everybody will get up and watch it on NASA TV. We'll be launching that morning, and just 6 hours later, we'll dock with the International Space Station, which will be our home for the next 6 months. Yes, the training, I was selected at NASA in 2013, and I was selected for this particular flight just about a year and a half ago, a little over a year and a half ago, and all of that time is spent training. One of the things with the International Space Station that's important now is that we don't have enough people that everybody can specialize, so everybody needs to be a jack of all trades. And so everybody that goes, myself included, is trained for spacewalks, station maintenance, working with science payloads, robotic operations. We learn the Russian language so we can work with our crewmates. And then over here, I'm currently in Russia, Star City, Russia, doing some of our last training for the Soyuz vehicle, which is the Russian launch vehicle that we use to get to the International Space Station. And so all of that training has kind of been, it's been a whirlwind of 5 years, but we're ready to go. That's right. Born and raised in Spokane my whole life. I love it. I still, when I come home, it's still just every part of Spokane feels like home. I know all the roads, and I definitely got my inspiration growing up in Spokane and driving over to Seattle, the Pacific Science Center, and of course now we have Mobius downtown. So I hope that more kids from the area will be inspired as they grow up. And of course, another Spokane native, Michael Anderson, was also an astronaut, and so hello to his family if he's watching. I appreciate that. Thank you. And I would like to give a shout out to all the veterans in the Spokane area on Veterans Day coming up here on Sunday, and to everybody that makes personal sacrifices for the greater good. So happy Veterans Day to everybody. Yes, thank you. Nice to speak with you today. Sure, and yes, and it's a great question because I think a lot of people expected a very long delay, and of course the delay got shortened. There's three important questions that we needed to ask ourselves after the anomaly: what happened, why did it happen, and how can we ensure that's not going to happen again? And I was working with all of our flight directors and NASA managers and Roscosmos managers over here. Nobody was going to give a green light for this flight until those three questions were answered. And so we set that December 3rd date to work toward. But everybody knew that at any point, if there was a risk or if there was an unknown or if there was, a reason why we might be in the same danger to happen, that what happened in October happens again, then we'd pull the plug. And that's still right up until launch day. There's still people that can prevent that launch if they see a safety factor. And so what we'd learned in the past is that we don't fly with unknowns. We don't fly. Hope is not a course of action in space flight. We want knowns. So the launch was moved up primarily to keep the space station manned. We have the International Space Station Orbiting Science Laboratory has a crew of 3 people right now. Based on the life of their return vehicle, they need to get back by the end of December. And so it was important to have a handover time so that when we got up there, somebody was there to show us the ropes. Emotions kind of don't come into play in some of these decisions. I think as astronauts, things change so often, and with good reason, that you have to be careful not to be so excited for something that you overlook risk. And so like I was talking about, NASA and all of our space agencies that work with the International Space Station, everybody is driven by a desire to keep space station manned. That said, we're not so focused on that we're going to put crews at additional risk. And the same thing with me. I was not going to blindly sit back and say, okay, I want to fly as soon as possible. Maybe we can move up without doing the due diligence of figuring out, what happened and why. And so, of course, I'm excited, but I'm also always prepared. And even right now, I could get a phone call and say, we're not going to go for a few months if something came up. And so we kind of pare down the emotions and just kind of take it as we come. I think most astronauts don't truly believe they're launching to space until they're about halfway there. So I would not call it necessarily a surprise. I would say it's a predictable incident. When engineers design hardware, they always have a probability of failure. And when you combine all those probabilities of failure, sometimes the holes in the Swiss cheese line up, and we're cognizant of that. That's exactly why we have a launch abort system on the vehicle. And so, the mood over here in Russia and really close to the designers and engineers and trainers that have worked with this vehicle for a long time is really one of satisfaction. And obviously we never want that anomaly to happen again, but we're also very realistic that sometimes things fail. Space is hard. Nothing is routine. So many things have to go right on every launch. But when something goes wrong, when you can return the crew and you can look them in the eye and have a debriefing and everybody can get together and find out what happened, that is a success. I know a lot of people see that as a launch failure, but a lot of us inside the program see that as a success. Absolutely. And, one of the important things when we're accomplishing something as major as launching rockets to space is that we don't use the success as the indicator that everything is okay. You can have things go wrong and still have an overall successful launch. And so it's important to note that with those 3 launches, not only were they successful, it's 2 so far, but we've also, they're taking a very hard look at every single component and making sure that there's no more indicators of failure. And so far, everybody's been confident that we're back on track. So the official report from Roscosmos stated that it was a sensor manufacturing issue with a sensor. And so they've taken a look at that part. They've done an inspection on our rocket and everyone that's built after it. They've looked at their processes. And so, we're confident that that particular issue won't happen again. But the important thing that we learned from all incidents in spaceflight in the past is that you can't just look at that one part because there's a billion other parts on that rocket. And so you have to make sure that what caused that particular part to fail isn't being repeated on other parts. And they've absolutely done that. Yes, I can. How are you doing, Alex? Good. I'm in Star City, Russia. So I've been here for about a week and a half, and we're finishing up our final training and exams prior to our launch. Whirlwind is a great way to describe it, actually. You know, the one thing that you learn quickly in the spaceflight business is that everything is dependent on everything else. And so one hiccup in the system, even especially a major hiccup like in October, causes a lot of ripple on effects. For us, the end state for our crew was that we got moved up. And so we had to cut some training and we had to compress some things and we had to travel a little bit earlier than expected. But we are absolutely right on track for successful launch on December 3rd. Oh, absolutely. You know, that a training flow for one of these space station flights lasts anywhere from a year and a half to 2 years. And last June, we were actually the backup crew for the crew that's currently on space station. And so at that time, we had done all of the training needed to fly in space. And so over the last few months, we've been kind of making sure that we keep up on emergency procedures and looking at current science payloads. And so that, you know, of course, we cut some training, but it would nothing that affects the readiness of our crew. So that's a great question. Those are to replace some of our outboard batteries on space station with some updated batteries. You know, they made the decision to leave those batteries kind of stowed on a pallet outside of the space station for future crew to do. They're not super time compressed. We'd like to get those installed as quickly as we can, but there's not necessarily an engineering requirement that compresses those to a certain time period. We are looking at perhaps maybe doing some EVAs, spacewalks during the short handover period in December. But we're also trading that off with some of the science requirements. And so our crew is absolutely ready to do that. In fact, my crewmate, David St. Jacques, and I, we were able to train those procedures on the ground before we left, just in case we did those. And if they don't get done in December, then we have, you know, sometime over the next year, we'll do those. But we are ready to execute. That's correct. Somebody will do that in the next year, and you know, maybe it'll be me. But if it ends up being, you know, our crew, we will have been the third crew assigned to that spacewalk. And so one of the things that we get really used to at NASA and really in the space agencies across the world is schedules are always in flux. And so you know, you prepare for everything, and then you kind of see where it comes as you get closer. You know, I think I have my family pretty well trained by this time. You know, for the last 15 years, I've flown helicopters in the Army and was a test pilot, and so they're kind of used to me walking out the door to do things that are not really comfortable with. But I think they understand. We've talked a lot about flying on the vehicle, like you said, the Russian space vehicle in particular. I try to talk to them a lot about the risk mitigation that we do, about the technical side of the rocket. I think sometimes when we're on the inside, we have so much information about the systems and our procedures and what to do in the case of every failure that it's actually easier for us because we really understand, you know, risk mitigation, system redundancy, and we gain a lot of confidence. And so what I try to do with my family is kind of explain to them why my comfort level is where it is. Now, of course, on the day, again, we'll probably be a lot calmer than our families were. I think our families have the hardest job emotionally during these launches. Absolutely, I do have confidence. After the incident happened, the space agencies immediately went into the same thing that they do every time that there's any level of failure, whether major or minor, which is, what happened, why did it happen, and how can we be sure this is not going to happen again? And nobody was going to give a green light for this launch until those three questions were answered. And if any point up until our launch, there's any doubt about any one of those three questions, then that information will be raised, and we can stop the launch at any point. And so we are not so driven by the end state that we're going to overlook risk. And every day there's a lot of teams all over the world continuing to look at the data, continuing to evaluate our rocket and the systems, not only on the part that failed, but on the whole rocket and the whole vehicle. That's a good question on how it changed. It hasn't necessarily. I think we always look at that possibility. When one of the things that struck me when I first learned how to be a pilot was realizing that the second day of flight school was not, how to fly from point A to point B, but it was how to do how to handle every emergency that could possibly go wrong. When you're training, you're rarely doing a normal day, and so we do these failures so often in the simulators here that I've actually talked to astronauts and cosmonauts who say, it was so quiet on launch day. I was so used to alarms and emergencies in the simulator that it was so quiet. And now, obviously, having that happen for real does change the perspective a little bit. But I'll tell you what it really does is give me confidence in this rocket. I don't see October 11th as a failure. I see it as absolutely a success, because we were talking to our friends Nick and Alexei that night and getting their feedback, and that's a good day. Thank you, Alex. We'll talk to you later. The Army astronauts have a very proud legacy in the astronaut program. We currently have 3 active duty astronauts, and we have 7 retired Army who are still working either as active astronauts or as management astronauts at Johnson Space Center in Houston. I can tell you that just like everywhere else in the Army, the biggest attributes that we can bring to the table are leadership and team skills. And those traits that I learned in the Army as both a follower and as a leader, working in austere environments with small groups and high-gain tasks where lives are at risk, those traits have absolutely transferred over into my time at NASA. And I think that is the best thing that we can bring to NASA and really everywhere from the Army. Well, the mission of the Army always intrigued me from a young age. I'm somebody that's very hands-on. I kind of enjoy, running around, getting dirty in the woods, and I also knew that I wanted to do engineering, and I've had a goal, like you said, of space flight since I was very young. And when I came across and I learned about West Point, I was a single-track mind on that path. And the Army astronauts at the time, Pat Forrester in particular, he's class of 1979, West Pointer, retired Army colonel. And I, heard from him when I was about 18 years old. And I listened to a speech that he gave, and he said that, most people that want to be astronauts end up not getting selected. So choose a career path that if you don't get selected will absolutely satisfy you for life. And I chose the Army because if I wasn't here at NASA, I want to be out boots on the ground with soldiers. In the Army, obviously, we talk a lot about leadership and team skills because it is absolutely the force multiplier that makes us successful. What I learned in the Army, not just academically, but what I learned to apply was that my best role on the team was enabling the success of everyone around me. When I was a commander, I had over 60 pilots in my troop, and I learned that my job was not to lead the way all the time and show them where to go. It was sometimes to step back, see what they thought of, how they saw best to do the mission, and then break down the barriers that they had to success and try to enable their success. And I really honed those skills through the Army, and I hope to be able to continue to transition that to where my presence on a team can enable others and enable the group to achieve even more. I've had so many mentors over the course of my Army career and really around my life. At every step of the way, I've had a different mentor or leader that I look back and I'm so thankful that they stepped in at certain times. But the biggest thing that all of them had in common was that they believed in me. And I remember early on, Colonel Kip Nygren at West Point, when I walked in as a 19-year-old plebe at West Point freshman, and I said I want to major in aerospace engineering. I remember him just having all the confidence in the world that I could do it. And him having confidence in me gave me confidence. And that situation was repeated so many times over my Army career, from flight school to test pilot school to when I was a company commander. Leaders in the Army, when they look at their soldiers and they say, I'm confident that you can do this. Now, how can I help? There is just no limit to what you can accomplish. I think the most important thing is that we will always perform best at what we are passionate about. You asked me earlier why did I join the Army if I wanted to be an astronaut since I was younger. I think there's a common stereotype that these are jet pilots from the Air Force and the Navy that do this kind of thing. And but what I realized was I was passionate and I wanted to fly, but I wanted to fly helicopters, and I wanted to be with soldiers, and I wanted to be in the Army. And that was my path. But somebody else, you look at my astronaut class, and we have scientists, and we have engineers, and we have people that have never been in the military. We have medical doctors. Colonel Drew Morgan from the Army is a medical doctor. But the thing we have in common is that all of us pursued a passion. The Army has such a diverse array of job opportunities and career opportunities. Whether you want to stay in the trenches and as 11 Bravo infantryman, or if you want to be an investigator in a science lab somewhere, there is something for everybody out there. So I would say follow your passion with the end state of your big goals in mind. But you got to wake up every day loving what you do, and there's a place in the Army for every type of person. So I tell you what, that's maybe one of the perks about getting moved up in our schedule is that I will be able to watch the Army-Navy game en route from the International Space Station. I'll say stay tuned because we might have a little bit of a special event planned for that. And as we close, I do want to shout out to all of our veterans for Happy Veterans Day here on November 11th. All right, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Kia. I do see the incident that happened on October 11th with our launch abort as not as a failure, but as a success. Because those systems, that launch abort system was built a long time ago. It had not been exercised since 1983. And when it was needed, it performed flawlessly, exactly as designed. And so those of us from inside the program, we understand the risk of space flight. We are professional risk mitigators every single day. But we also understand that probabilities are never 100% when you're in a business like this. And when you can have a failure of that magnitude and be talking to the crew about it that night, then that's a successful day. And so it actually bolsters my confidence in the rocket and in the processes that we have. Absolutely. As soon as that accident happened, just like with any failure, large and small in the space business, we need to find out what happened, why it happened, and how can we make sure it won't happen again? Do we need to redesign processes, or does a material failure? And those three questions were critical to answer before we got the green light to launch on December 3rd. And the preliminary investigation that came out from Roscosmos and was shared across agencies across the world really gives us confidence for this launch. And I'm also confident in the culture of these space programs where if somebody discovers something next week that gives them pause, we are not just marching toward launch blindly. Every single day we're reevaluating the safety of our launch. And if anything came up, then we'll get pulled. But if we sit on that rocket on December 3rd and we've gotten the go from across the board, then I'm very confident that we're ready to go. Well, I think it is important, to have our own assets in the U.S. It certainly highlights for all of the international partners involved in the space station, how reliant we are on a single vehicle. And, in the space business, we're never one fault tolerant. We are always multiple faults tolerant, which means if something fails, that it doesn't prevent the mission. And everybody is well aware that we rely on the Soyuz. It is the workhorse of the space program right now and has been for a long time. And we're confident in the vehicle and getting back to it. But absolutely, we need that redundancy to get our astronauts up to the space station. There are so many. I tell you, I'm so happy that I'm going to have 6 months in space. We're not just going to space to visit; we're going to go there to live. So there's the small things like learning how to live every single day in weightlessness, and what do you do when your toothbrush floats away? To the big things, being able to conduct a spacewalk and conduct maintenance on the outside of a space station, be able to do robotics and be able to capture visiting vehicles, being able to continue working with my crewmates from Russia and Canada to accomplish this mission. There are so many aspects of it that when I step back and I look at it, it is quite amazing what we can accomplish every single day working with our international partners. And I'm just excited for the experience. I don't think I've really defined in my head what one thing will amaze me. What I do hear from many astronauts is that as soon as you look back at the Earth in all its glory and realize how fragile it is, you'll never quite be the same. I'm looking forward to those moments. It's a funny question about the food. I think I went through a phase about a month ago, maybe a few weeks ago, about cramming in the food. And after about 4 or 5 days of eating all my favorite foods, I thought, okay, I can't keep doing this for a month. I need to pare it back. So you try to cram it in, but at some point you just realize you're going to stay connected. You're going to miss certain things. But what I've learned moving all over the world and being in different isolated environments is that whenever you sacrifice something, it opens up your mind to learn something new. And so I'm looking forward to seeing maybe what foods I crave on the space station. But missing families is really big. that the gap is somewhat filled in by how close our crew is. We're very much like family at this point, but missing our families is something you just can't replace. This opportunity is incredible, and before I joined the space program, I knew that this would be an incredible opportunity. And the more I've worked in the space program, and I realize just how much it takes to be successful every single day, I'm even more in awe of the people that work on the ground every single day to make these flights happen. Even when we're not having a spectacular launch, we are flying a space station that is the size of a football field with nearly 3,400 square feet of living space inside, and we're operating a national laboratory worth over $10 billion every single day, with over 230 experiments going on every single day. And there are teams all over the world, hundreds of people every day that keep that running. And so, yes, we were reminded a month ago of what can happen in a very large catastrophic way. But every single day, you have people who are making sacrifices with their kids and their families, and they're coming in and they're putting their best foot forward, and they are preventing near misses. They are seeing something that could go wrong in a few days, and they're preventing it. And that situation is repeated every day and across the world just to make one day happen. So I certainly don't take a minute of it for granted, and I'm really excited to be part of this. Sure. I think, your question, is anybody shrugging it off? Absolutely not. I think from inside the space agency, we are extremely dedicated to finding out what happened. There's three major questions that we ask ourselves every time something goes wrong, whether that's something major or something minor. And that's what happened, why did it happen, and how do we prevent it from happening again? And until those three questions were answered, we're not going to, we weren't going to fly again, given the booster failure. And then the same thing with the leak in the last Soyuz. The investigations that are conducted are extremely thorough. And they not only apply to that particular failure, but they also look across all processes and say, are we going down the same rabbit hole in any other location that we're not looking at? Are we having a near miss anywhere that we don't know about? And so it obviously heightens everybody's attention when incidents happen. But when you think about the number of things that have to go right for a single space flight, and we're not working with 100% probabilities, we're working with engineering odds, so we're always going to be in the 98, 99% percentiles. And sometimes you're going to have an incident. And those aren't surprises. They are predictable anomalies, but you have to handle them with due diligence to make sure that there's not a trend. But the fact that they happen in close proximity to one another, it doesn't raise my interest any more than if it was just one of them. But I am confident that we've taken a look back at those incidents. That's my opinion. We have a lot of things across the space program. We work with a lot of moving parts. And we have incidents big and small that never kind of raise up to national attention at all times. We're constantly risk mitigating. We're constantly solving problems and moving schedules. And these two incidents occurring, they're I don't believe they're related, and I don't believe that we're overlooking anything. That there's a trend that's going to continue. I've got all the confidence going forward. So I was actually back in Houston. I was at home at the time. My crewmates Oleg and David were serving as the backup crew for Nick and Alexei, but they didn't have a third crew member. So I was actually back in Houston watching the launch. I was listening to the radio loops. I understood what happened, kind of when it happened, and I followed along with the crew. I think sometimes inside the program, as close as we are, we have a little bit more information, and so I was able to follow the voice loops and kind of understand what was going on. And so my nerves didn't kind of get the best of me. Obviously, I was the happiest when I heard from Nick and Alexei after that launch that they were feeling well. But I watched it from Houston. Well, when I gave Nick a hug goodbye, before his launch, we kind of said, hey, the next time we hug, it'll be on space station. And so when I saw him again, I gave him a hug and I said, hey, we're not supposed to have gravity right now. But I was happy to see him, and it was more of a privilege to sit down with him and just kind of get the debrief from his perspective on things that happened, and both so we can look at our procedures going forward and just kind of to get the inside scoop. There's a lot that kind of dependencies that go into that planning, and our management team at NASA is working closely with the Russians and our other international partners to determine the plan. We never just look at the next launch, the next launch in the spring, but we've got to look at how does this affect things over the next couple of years? How does it relate to our commercial crew programs, getting ready to launch crews, other international partners that have seats on flights, and so all of that is being determined right now by our management, but I don't have the insight into that personally. I think communication with my family is the biggest way to juggle that. And my family's somewhat gotten used to me doing high risk activities. And as far as young kids, they don't really understand if we're going to space or if we're just driving across the state for a week. Their concern is that, hey, parents aren't home right now, and my crewmates both have children as well. And the hardest part about this business is being away from the kids. But what I hope to teach him, and what I hope to teach all kids that are kind of looking at this, is that to achieve anything, it takes a lot of sacrifice. And the launch day is the result of that sacrifice. That's something to be gained. But we didn't get there unless we had a lot of early mornings at 5:30 in the morning on Tuesdays. For the last few years, just getting the work done. And so I really hope that what the kids take away from it is, the amount of work that goes into achieving a dream, and that it is worth it. Yeah, I feel very fortunate that multimedia communication can keep us in contact with our families much closer than before. So my family, immediate family, will be watching from Mission Control in Moscow, and I have a handful of family and friends coming out here to Russia to watch the launch personally. And so I feel very well supported. Most of our kind of teary goodbyes were done before I left Houston, before I came over here to do my last training here in Russia. And so we're really kind of focused forward on the mission. Thank you. Good morning, Cadet Eddie, right? I'm doing great. It's really great to talk to you. I'm really excited to be able to talk to folks at West Point. Sure. We go up to, we're not going up to visit space anymore. We go up to live in space. And so we train for the 6 month mission. And within those 6 months, we have a combination. Part of our time, about 40, 50% of our time is spent on space station maintenance. And so that's your day-to-day tasks everywhere from, changing filters and, doing, maintaining the systems on the space station, like the electricity and the plumbing, and doing major tasks like updates and wireless updates, things like that. And then we have a lot of science going on. This is a national orbiting laboratory, and so we have over 250 experiments every single day going on the International Space Station, and we interact with a handful of those every day. And so some of the experiments that I'm really excited about are ones that I'm actually the subject for. So we have a couple medical experiments going on. One of them is from the Canadian Space Agency. It's called T-Bone. And it's an experiment that's actually evaluating how bones are regenerated. And so we knew that, astronauts early on in spaceflight had some amount of bone loss that was very extreme compared to what they would have had on Earth. And because the bones weren't being loaded, our bones are only as strong as they need to be. And so this particular experiment looks at, how our bones regenerate in space. We've gotten to the point where we're not losing bone because of our countermeasures that we're doing, our exercise protocols. But is that bone the same structure? And that I think those types of experiments to me are really cool because they have a direct medical application for folks on the ground. And so that'll be an interesting one to see the results of. That is correct. So that's an interesting question. One of the interesting things about being an astronaut on the space station, and this is compared to shuttle astronauts, is that we can't specialize. We don't have the crew members, the quantity of crew members on the space station to specialize. And so all of us have to become jacks of all trade. And so, there are aspects of my job that are absolutely related to exactly what I was doing, engineering and flying. Flying at the Soyuz up to the space station and being a crew member is absolutely applicable to my experience on being a helicopter pilot. But the person sitting next to me is a medical doctor from Canada, and so he's had to learn something completely new to fly that vehicle to space. Now, when we get to space and we do biology experiments and human research experiments, that's kind of more in his background and a little bit outside mine. But that's one of the reasons why it takes so long to train a crew member for these 6 months. I've been training since 2013 for this mission, or for the space flight, and then about 2 years for this mission. And the most important thing is adaptability. And that's what I learned in the Army was adaptability. I wasn't just an aerospace engineer, as you well know already. Being in the Army, you have to adapt and do a lot of different things. And your ability to learn things that are completely outside your comfort zone or your strengths will determine your success. And that's no different here. So first of all, West Point is absolutely a great place to start for our career. There's a lot of West Pointers in our office at NASA, and we have a lot of pride in, of course, being Navy, but also in having gone to West Point. And we have a lot of the same shared experiences. And one of the things that we talk about is the breadth of experience that you get at West Point. If you look at, academic, military, physical, just that's not the normal college experience for folks. And it really, without you really noticing it, every single day you're learning to adapt to things that aren't your strength. Every single cadet that wakes up at West Point and goes through a day there is going to encounter something that is a strength of theirs, and they're going to encounter something that's a weakness. And you're going to have to overcome every single one of those in order to be successful. And I remember in particular, when my academics got really busy early on in my career at West Point, or early on in my time at West Point, and I went out to, it's going to sound funny, but I went out to a haircut formation inspection. And I was like, the day before, I just decided, I'm going to focus on my studies, and I'm not going to worry about shining my shoes tonight, because I think this engineering test is more important. And I remember my squad leader saying, Cadet McClain, you don't get to choose either or. It's going to be both, or you're not going to be successful. And I really clicked early on, like, hey, you know what? You can't specialize to be successful in a career like this. You have to be successful at all of it, whether you like it or not. What am I looking forward to the most? One of them is launch day. As wanting to be an astronaut ever since I was a kid, I've seen so many launches on TV and on the internet and everything else, and to actually be able to feel what that feels like, I can't wait. The other thing I'm most looking forward to is doing a spacewalk. Working inside that suit. It's not a suit that you put on, it's a system that you get in. It's the most like flying a helicopter of anything I've done here. It's a complicated system. It's a high gain mission, and it's a high risk mission, working with your partner and a large team on the ground. And there's just not going to be an experience like it. And I'm really looking forward to that. It always comes back to personal relationships. The people that are close to you are really what make anything worth it that you do. My advice to you would be to pay attention to the people around you and always find time with them. We have the urgent and the important, and everything's urgent in our jobs, but don't ever forget the important, and that's the people that you come home to. And so, I'm going to miss most of my friends and family that have helped to get me here, but I can't wait to come back and share the experience with them.